Welcome to the Real Estate Dads podcast. We've got our special guest, Tom Dunkel. Tom is a seasoned veteran within the real estate industry, both to big wins and losses. Tom started his career in 2006, right before the massive recession, and he was raising two small kids during that time. Fast forward, he has purchased over 11,000 mortgages that he has worked with lenders in getting out of. He's a developer of mini storage and boat storage and is here to tell us about how he has managed all of those years of stress to being a successful real estate investor in the industry. Tom, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you guys, Max and Trevor. It's great to be with you.
And Tom, why don't you give us a quick introduction and tell us about some of your recent deals that you just closed?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Max and Trevor. Great being with you guys today. It's always a dangerous question to ask me because now I'm like solidly in my 50s. So I find myself going like on and on and on and on like an old man when people ask me questions like that, kind of open-ended. And so I'll keep it short and then we can go back and fill in some blanks if you guys want to. But I was a corporate guy after business school. I was doing mergers and acquisitions in the aerospace industry and IT services and software and logistics. And so really got a great kind of background in financial management and modeling and projections and capital markets because we were, raising tons of money to do these deals. In fact, I have a little acrylic trophy over here I keep on my windowsill for it's a $140 million credit facility that I worked on. So anyway, had that great experience in the corporate world, worked with some amazing people. But as it turns out, I just wasn't cut out for corporate life. So 2006, I got fired from my corporate finance job, decided I was going to go build my real estate empire, cause I had socked away some money. Cause I knew I had to go do something different outside of the, corporate walls. And, I went full on into real estate 2006, got my butt whooped really good those next few years, but learned a lot of lessons, some hard lessons, lost a lot of money, but, reinvented, started, getting into distressed mortgage notes, which was a nice marriage between kind of my corporate finance career and also my love for real estate. So my partner, Joe Downs, and I connected in 2010. We built up a company called U.S. Mortgage Resolution that's now generated over $55 million of revenue in the distressed debt space, which has allowed us to dabble in some other things. So we've done some hard money lending. We've done some fix and flip stuff. We were partners in a title company for a little bit. But when we started learning about self-storage in 2017, it just really resonated with us with what we were trying to do as far as building our company, because distressed debt is awesome, but it can be super volatile and very unpredictable. So we were looking for an asset class that was going to help balance that out, get that portfolio effect going. And so when we started hearing about storage in 2017, it was checking all the boxes. 2018, we started going to all the conferences, getting educated, meeting the people. 2019, we joined a mastermind group, rounded out our team. Because Joe and I are good kind of numbers guys and deal guys, and we can get stuff closed and raise the capital. But we weren't good at finding the off-market leads on the front end. And we certainly had no idea how to run a self-storage facility on the back end. So when we rounded out the team that way, then we were able to go confidently forward and acquire our first facility in 2020. And just this past week, we closed on our 16th acquisition. We've now acquired over 600,000 square feet of self-storage across 8 states.
Wow.
For a value of about $44 million.
Fantastic.
My goodness.
Fantastic.
How was that? Was that short?
That was solid. That was solid.
Yeah, we want to make sure we establish the authority for the next question. Tell us about the kids.
Yeah. So, that's the funny part, right? So 2006, when I got fired from my job, right? So I'm the breadwinner, right? And I've got a wife and 2 babies at home. My son was 4, my daughter was 2. So it was definitely like an, oh, you know what moment, like, man, I got to figure something out here. I got people relying on me, to go out and make the ends meet. And, it was really, really, really tough there for a while. But I stuck it out, and thankfully transitioning from corporate world to real estate entrepreneur world, even though it was hard and I got my butt whooped those first few years, once I got it kind of figured out, It was great. I started making more money than I was in corporate life, but I had the lifestyle where I was able to spend a lot of time with my kids. I don't know if you guys know what field day is. But when the kids, the elementary school kids, when they're out running around, like doing the 3-legged race or the sack race or whatever, so I ran field day at my kids' school for 11 years, which was a great experience because I got to be there for my kids. I got to meet my kids' friends. I got to meet my kids' friends' parents. I got to know the teachers and all that. So it was a really cool experience. I wouldn't change for the world.
How did you manage that? You're diving into something new in 2006, which in my experience, that's time consuming still. It's not that you stop working. You just stop working you stop going to a building to work.
That's right.
You work at home
Yeah.
So, you're obviously very productive. You've built this incredible, you got a behemoth that you've built for sure, right? As modest as you and humble as you are about it, you built a monster, and you still made time to do all this family stuff. How did you balance that? How did you create that balance?
That's such a good question because you're right. It was challenging, and it was definitely non-traditional, I'll say, because we did use daycare, so we would drop the kids off. And my wife would go to her job. I'd go back to the house and start doing my work, or I'd go, I would oftentimes have lunch appointments and this and that. But my partner, Joe, was in the same boat. His kids were actually younger than my kids. So he was really deep in it. And, so it was not uncommon for us to get on the phone at like 9:00 at night for like 3 hours, just talking about, business and stuff. So it was like, 9 to midnight is when we were able to actually crank out some work, when the kids were asleep.
I see. So that makes sense. Yeah. Just cranking it out whenever you can get it done.
Exactly.
Yeah. So tell us more about this, because I want to hear, because this is something that, Trevor and I are both young dads. I've got a 2-year-old and a 2-week-old. Actually today.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
In fact, we were on a call 2 Thursdays ago, Tom, and I literally during the call went, I got to go. My wife went into labor.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. But as a young dad, I'm definitely in kind of what you're describing, in just that, it's downtime in the market. We started our organization in 21, and, when we were new when we started, and now we're kind of at this point where things are, a little like, hey, how long are we going to be in this kind of trough in the market? And it's definitely, it's something that is stressful. And I think that a lot of guys are out there, they're trying to figure out how to get through it. So how did you muscle through that? You're newly fired, as you put it, you had your butt whooped during the first, go through. How was that stress wise? You had the kids going to daycare. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, it was definitely a trying time for sure. Thankfully, my wife had a decent job, so she was able to, keep some money coming in and, have health insurance and that sort of thing. So that was a huge plus for sure. But, I think we had always, as a couple and then as a family, we had always lived below our means. So I think that was kind of set up early on. And then even as, the money was starting to come in, my career was doing pretty well. I was with a publicly traded company that gave me a lot of stock options, right? So when I left, I had, was able to capitalize on that. And that kind of gave me my war chest to go and, build and then lose my real estate empire. But I think that was the key is anytime in our family, anytime, we'd get a bonus or some kind of windfall or whatever, that just went into savings. And we just always lived below our means on just our straight W-2 income. So I think that set us up nicely. We had a nice cushion so that when, what did hit the fan, that we were in a position where we could absorb that. And that also goes like for our house. Like we had a home equity line of credit on our house because we had built up some equity, but that was like the last resort kind of emergency fund, if you will.
Especially in 06.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, especially in 06. That was when the home equity credits were really fallen off the train there when values dropped.
Definitely. And you know what happened also, Max, was I had some friends who had like zero drawn on their lines of home equity lines, and the bank was calling them. They were canceling those lines of credit back then in 08, 09 time frame. And so when I heard that through the grapevine, I was like, oh man. So I actually went and I drew my entire balance and I just put it into like a safe, like money market fund or something, just so it would be earning some money. Cause that was my last like emergency fund. So I didn't want to be caught without that. So I had to go and, be a little strategic about that.
Sure. So, okay. So Trevor, do you have any questions before we keep going forward?
Well, I know that Tom's, we were just chatting a little bit before you hopped on, Max, and he's got a son that's just about to go into the Navy as an officer, a submariner.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I'm real, that's interesting to me that your son is not getting into business or entrepreneurship and real estate and all that stuff. So I'm really curious about that story.
Yet.
Yeah.
I mean, can you think of a profession that is more opposite from what I'm doing in self-storage or real estate than going into a can under the ocean? Like,
no,
it's like, I don't know. Should I be offended?
It's so funny you say this because my dad was a federal government employee. He was a federal probation and parole officer. His dad owned restaurants. And my dad always said that he saw how much his dad struggled, because business was good, business was bad. It wasn't always struggling, but it was not stable. And, and I think that for, my dad on education to me, like business wise, like he was a great guy, but he could not help me in business. He was not able to give me, proper advice and
right.
Your son, and one thing I'll say, cause I know I'm talking to Trevor here, who's a Marine. But I always thought I would have benefited from experience in the armed service. I was young. I was petulant. Someone kind of smack me and say, "Hey, be dedicated." And so when I hear people going into the service, often I'm like, "No, I think that's great." And I've got a very close buddy who went to the Naval Academy in Annapolis. How old's your son?
He's 21.
21. So I have a buddy who graduated from Naval Academy in Annapolis. He's been in the Navy now for over 20 years, but he's going to leave in his mid-40s.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's set up. He's got a ton of experience. He was able to get a master's degree while he's been in the service. And he's going to be able to go on to get a totally second career. And on a side note to 06, I mean, for me, I'm 43. And in 2009, I lost everything. I was in real estate. I've been in real estate for about 7 years by that time. Got in most 23, and that time in the market, I had done very well for my age. I'd made a couple $100,000 a year in my 20s, which was, I'll call it the time. Well, that's the thing. When you meet people who make more money, eventually you go, it wasn't really that much money, but it felt like a lot.
Right.
but still, 09 came, 08, 09 came along, and that money just went. Whoosh. I had rolled all my money into deals, and got wiped right off the table. And when I meet some of these individuals who go into some kind of government stable job that has a long-term pension on the backside, a part of me thinks that's great. My dad also federal probation and then went to work for the public defender in Ventura County. He has 2 pensions.
Right. Yeah.
And, and I look at that and I go, here we are working on these big paychecks that come in, and then, we put them into deals, and then we get fees. And then, you said you can't eat equity. So you're hoping your cash flow comes in. Real estate's hard to get going. But once you do, you have a lot of these really large checks. And I think that for those of us who've been through several cycles, you learn the value of being that good squirrel. But no, I'm not faulting your son at all. When you say, he's going to the Navy, I'm like, he can go to the Navy. He can still come out and make a killing in real estate at whatever time he decides. So no, I think it's great. Yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he must take after his mother because, as I mentioned in my intro, like it was just kind of burning inside of me to get outside of the corporate four walls. I can't imagine what it would be like in like the military four walls, right? So, but growing up, he was just, he was always, he's the firstborn, right? Firstborn boy. So he, was always very much of a rule follower, wanted to, keep mom and dad happy, that sort of thing. He got introduced to scouting at a young age. And so, we were able to do that together. And, thankfully he was able to make it all the way to Eagle Scout. And so, we did that together. We've been on, backpacking trips in the backcountry of New Mexico, a couple of times. New Mexico once and Colorado another time. And so we've had those really, amazing experiences, life experiences that I'll certainly remember, for my whole life. It was really cool that we were able to do that together. But yeah, he's just always seemed to like the structure and like hey, if I do these 10 things, I'm going to get this merit badge. And if I get 21 merit badges, I can go for my Eagle rank and, do those kinds of things. So, I think he just he really liked that. And he just leaned into it. Right. And he's also a STEM kid. So he really liked kind of the engineering kind of thing. So he's graduating with a degree in aeronautics, and then he's to go into submarines. He's going into NPS, nuclear power school, where he's basically got to be getting his master's in nuclear engineering. So he's just, one of those kids that when he was young, he just kind of knew what he wanted to do. I had no clue. I'm still not sure what I want to do in my life. But he was just that kind of kid. And I'm obviously super proud of him. I warned Trevor earlier, don't get me started about my son or my daughter for that matter. She's amazing as well. But, yes, he just seemed to thrive in that kind of structured environment.
And how did you get him into those? Right? Becoming an Eagle Scout sounds massive. So what was that him? Was that you? Was that the mom who
scouting?
Yeah, all of these things. You're mentioning some big things. Like, how did you get him to sink his teeth in and want to do these things?
Yeah, I think I was kind of the one pushing scouting. Even though it wasn't really for me, I was a Boy Scout way back when. And when I think about education for our kids, it's more than just the classroom, right? So when I think about education, I think of it kind of holistically. So I think about, yes, you got to go to school, you got to, do the reading, writing, arithmetic, right? But I feel like, scouting and learning those kinds of life skills is also important. I think sports is very important, working on a team, having that discipline, the time management that goes into that when you're, having to do your homework, mom and dad are pushing for good grades and you've got to, support your team, that sort of thing. And then I also felt like music was another thing that kind of rounded out the whole, my view of holistic education. So my son played piano for a little while. I didn't really keep up with it, but again, it was part of that whole experience as far as I'm concerned that's required to give your kids the best shot and to give them the most exposure to different things.
And so within those first years of your business, when you were, I hate to say it like this, but 06 to 2010 or 12, it was being lost. How, I guess in a goal sense, were you doing the work for the free time to be there for your kid, to help him in these, I'll call it 11 years of doing these field days? Or was it like, hey, I've got the goal of real estate, and then being able to be an active dad was kind of a byproduct of that? Was there one goal that took priority over the other, or how was that, the mindset for you? I
think, Max, that I'd always, I wanted to be an involved dad, right? Yeah. And I think that might be a result of my dad not being super involved with me. And I think he was a great dad, but he was more traditional minded, right? He was, born in 1930, my parents were born in 1936, right? So they were kind of the 1950s. My sister is the oldest. She was born in 1960. So it's, just more of a traditional, man's out, earning the money, mom's home with the kids kind of thing. So, even though my dad was a great guy and we did a lot of fun stuff together, he just wasn't there. And so I felt like I wanted to be there with and involved in my kids' lives, including, like I mentioned earlier, their friends and family friends and all that kind of thing.
How old is your daughter, Tom?
Yeah, so my she's awesome as well. She's 19. She's finishing up her first year at the University of South Carolina. And yeah, she's made the dean's list there. So yeah, proud of her as well.
Great. And what is she go into? What do you think? Where do you see her going?
Like I was saying, how my son is so structured and kind of knew what he wanted to do. Well, you can imagine where I'm going with this, right? So she's the other end of the spectrum, right? So this past summer, when she was finishing, you know, she had decided on where she wanted to go to school. And then it was, you know, what major was she going to pick? And she announces, she says, "Hey, I'm going to be a mass communications major." "Hey, sweetheart, that's great. I think that fits your skill set perfectly. You know, how'd you come up with that?" She said, "Well, I got a list of all the majors at the University of South Carolina, and I started crossing them out one by one." And that was the last one left over, mass communications. So,
wow. It's like media, right? Like,
yeah, it is. But I mean, it's the opposite of the way that my son would have attacked that problem, right? So she did it by process of elimination, which I get, you know, it's a legitimate way, but it's just funny to me how different they were.
The one she least disliked. That's what it's.
That's right.
What it was.
Exactly. But, you know, let's face it, most people don't end up in a profession that leverages their undergraduate education. So
absolutely. Yeah.
You know, I just wanted to get, you know, again, the exposure, you know, the experiences, the breadth of the experiences and the classes, the courses, the clubs, you know, that sort of thing. And University of South Carolina is a great spot, especially for her. You know, it's a bigger school. My son's at a very small school, which fits his personality better. She's at a bigger school, which fits her personality better. So it's kind of funny how that works as your kids end up, you know, getting to that college age. You know, they say that the college chooses the kid, is what they say.
And so when you were like raising them, just as a general, you know, like practice or whatever, did you take the type of approach where you know, just expose them to as much as possible and let them find their passions, or did you try to like steer them towards things, or like make sure that you were giving them financial education? Like, this is a thing you got to have. Like, what was your parenting approach on that?
Yeah, for sure. So when they were little, I wanted them to be exposed to different sports and music, like I was saying, different, you know, activities, that kind of thing. And then, you know, certain things would stick, other things wouldn't stick, right? So like my daughter did brownies and Girl Scout, but it just wasn't for her, right? And she played soccer and lacrosse. She was really good at those, but she didn't love it. And then she found cheerleading. So she just stopped doing everything else, including playing guitar, to just focus on cheerleading, competitive cheer. So we're talking, you know, the tumbling and the pyramids and all that stuff. It's very, very demanding. So she was all in with that. You know, she was traveling around the country and going to these competitions. And she tried out for the USC cheerleading squad, but there were like 7 spots for like 100 something girls, and unfortunately she didn't make it. But that was just something she was super passionate about, and we just kind of let her run with it.
Was there I mean, I have this conflict. I think of cheerleading has maybe some practical skills that you can apply in the real world, but there's probably zero or very near zero opportunity for a career in it. Was that ever, whereas like tennis, like is the right, is the highest paid sport that women can do. So like, did you ever have that discussion with that or with her?
I want to hear Tom's response first, but I will argue against this after.
I have a little different view as well, Max. So maybe we can gang up on Trevor here. But you would be, Trevor, tell me about your kids. You boys, girls?
I have 2 girls. One is 4. One is 2.
Okay.
So
if they get into cheerleading, you're going to understand cheerleading is big business. It really is. So I could see, as far as career wise, I could see potentially my daughter going into the cheer business. So like this summer when she's home from school, she's going to be working at her old gym, you know, teaching some of the younger kids. So there's the whole teaching and coaching aspect. But then these events that they put on are huge productions. I mean, I'm sure if you've ever been to any kind of big conference like, Best Ever or any of these other big real estate conferences, like there's a whole production that puts that show on, and it's the same thing in cheerleading. And they have all the gear, right? I mean, it's nichey, but you'd be surprised, man. If you went down there and you're selling bows, like the girls wearing their hair, man, you're cleaning up because you've got this captive audience of girls that love, glitter and sequins and stuff like that. And you just put these bows together. You sell those things, it costs you maybe $4 or $5 to make them. You're selling them for 25. And of course the mom and the dad are going to say yes, right, for their kids. So anyway, it actually is big business. But even if she doesn't go into that, to me, the most amazing thing about her cheer experience was, her teams were pretty big. Like you can have like 20 girls on the mat at one time. I mean, for them to coordinate and work together as a team in these very intricate moves and tumbling passes and pyramids and all that stuff. I was always impressed, not only with the girls, but with the coaches. Can you imagine trying to get 20, teenage girls to all work together like that? It's like crazy.
That makes a lot of sense. All right. I stand corrected.
Yeah, I was going to comment on the side of the work effort. Which is that for me, I just am an advocate of sports in general. And most sports that people play, they don't really generally get to play after college. That's kind of where it usually ends. You get to do it at a competitive level in high school, hopefully more so in college. And then for most people, it just kind of ends. But those skills that people pick up during those periods of time management, working on a team, being responsible to the other members of the team, having usually still an authoritative body that requires getting good grades to be on the team, not doing drugs to be on the team. So there's these other kind of factors that are associated with even having to be, good enough to compete, but also just good enough to even to be on a team at all.
I mean, you're getting discipline at a minimum. You get
at a bare minimum. And, and when I look at those things, because when you said all this stuff about the actual going into cheer as a professional, I was like, oh, wow, that is interesting. I wasn't thinking about that. But I'm a pretty big advocate of that, and my wife and I had this discussion years ago because she had a big experience in cheer. And I was like, we'll never have a daughter that will do cheer because that's subservient to the football team. Because I found out that at her high school, they had the girls cheerleading team raise money for the boys football team. But the girls, even to be on cheer, they had to spend like $2,000 to be on the team. Like it was a big amount of money. It wasn't a small amount. So when I found out that they were raising money for the males football team, I was furious. I was like, "There's no way we would have a daughter that would have to do that." My wife, I
don't like that either.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. Because Trevor's a dad of 2 girls, so just on a note. But when I look at the sports side of it and what she got out of it and her friends and her experience, she was just like, it was that was part of it. And the guys were doing the males team was also doing their own fundraisers. They also spent money. There was other things to it, but I
guess I watched the story of Serena and Venus Williams, the King Edward movie, and that was really inspiring. I was like, as a father that just really pushed this idea and didn't make all his daughters do it, but expose them to it. And the ones that were really good at it, he was like, you two, there's something here, and just really pushed them. So, I see the case for let them explore and find their passion. And I also see the case for if you can identify an opportunity that they're just not old and wise enough yet to see, giving them kind of a push in it could obviously create Serena and Venus Williams.
Could be. Yeah. And honestly, that's why I'm not, even though my son and my daughter have taken very different paths, I'm not worried the least bit about my daughter. As far as because like I said, she was a little flaky about choosing her major, and she's not really a huge fan of school, even though, like I said, she it comes easily to her. She's on the dean's list. So, but I feel like the same way she tried different stuff and zeroed in on cheer, I feel like that's what she's going to do in her professional career as well. I think she's going to get out of college. She's going to try some different jobs. She's not going to like them. And then one day something's just going to click and she's just going to go, full throttle right into that. And she's going to excel like crazy.
That's not a stress for you or your wife. What if, like having a dog, like not knowing, like you're just like, no, it's gonna be fine. Just everything's copacetic.
Yeah, everything's fine. Yeah, I think we just realize, who she is and how she works. We know that there is that passion in her, just waiting to find the right outlet.
So, and then regarding your son, so he's in university, he's at college right now, and he's going to graduate, he's going to enlist. So he's going to enlist as an officer because he already has his undergraduate degree. Is this correct?
Yes.
And then he's already selected being a submariner. Like that's the plan. And there's a path then for him to go into this nuclear reactor engineering advanced degree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. That's all set in place. He had to go through an interview process actually. So he's in school down in Florida, and they flew him up to Washington, D.C., and he had an interview with 2 reactor officers. And so that interview is basically like an oral exam. Mm-hmm. So he didn't have any materials with him, but, they were peppering him with questions about, fluid dynamics or this or that, whatever this kind of stuff he's learning about submarines. And so he had to answer it out of his head on the fly. And then after that, he had an interview with an admiral. So can you imagine that being, 19 years old or 20 years old, doing that?
It's an intense field. It's more, going underwater is more complicated than going into space.
Really?
Yeah. There's more geniuses under the ocean than flying rockets. I'm telling you. Yeah. You just described it very like he's 19 years old or 21 or something. And it's like, they're already, peppering him with all those questions and like making sure that he just has the capacity to get to the knowledge level that an admiral's at, who's been studying nuclear physics for God knows how long.
Right. Yeah. I mean, when you're underwater and, you're under attack, you don't want to be reaching for the physics book or the fluid dynamics book and flipping open to a page, right? I mean, you gotta be able to react, right away.
Yeah.
Trevor,
yeah. Dangerous waters.
Trevor, did we go to the moon?
Do I? Nah, I'm okay. I like land.
Did we go to the moon? Is moon landings real?
Oh, did we go to the moon? Wow. Well, this took a left turn. Yeah. Yes. I'm going to say yes.
So, fun fact, back in my aerospace days, my corporate days, so the chairman of the board of our company, was a 2-time shuttle astronaut, and he worked at, Houston, and his buddy that he met down there was none other than Neil Armstrong. So Neil Armstrong was recruited onto the board of the company that I was with. And so when they had a board meeting one day, the CEO invited me in for lunch. So I got to sit next to Neil Armstrong for lunch. And across the table was Sally Ride, who's the first woman in space. So it was a pretty cool little environment. But I was told not to ask too many questions of Dr. Armstrong because he's a very quiet kind of guy. He just wants to be known as a pilot from Ohio. And so those were the instructions I was given. So I wasn't able to ask, like, did you really go to the
moon? did you really go to the moon, Dr. Armstrong?
Trevor, it's a more dicey question than you think, because even Tom was over here going, I kind of want to ask this guy I'm sitting next to.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure, speaking of getting fired, I'm pretty sure I would have gotten fired.
Well, back to the your kids, which is what we want to really,
sure, of course.
Talk about, your
I had to share the story, but go ahead.
That's a great.
I wanted to ask the question. Yeah, I wanted to ask the question to get some revelry onto the call a little bit. So you're growing up, you're doing these deals. Was the money easy with the kids when you're growing up? Like, how long was it that you were thin living up until things were doing better? And what better is whatever you say. But you had a 4-year-old, you lost a lot of money during 06 to, I don't even know when, 10, 11, 12, and then things started doing better. But how was it for your kids during that time? Did they have a period of kind of living without and a period of them kind of living with? Or how was that? Because there's a lot of guys who are in that right now. Hey, how long do I have to have my family live thin to eventually know that we're going to do better? And how, what advice can you give listeners for that?
Yeah, sure. Well, it kind of goes back to what I said earlier, Max, which is, it's important to be living below your means. So, like, to my kids, they had no idea what was going on because we were able to maintain our modest lifestyle. And, we did go on vacations. Things were definitely, skinnier there for a little while. But because we had some savings and my wife was still working, we were able to make it pretty much invisible, what was happening with dad. But then as things, did get better, and the money did start coming in, which of course, it's never a straight line, right? So we had some good years early on and then it went back down and then, back up again. But, it really wasn't until, I felt like we were in a more secure place, which is many, many years later. I joke to people that, we were an 8-year overnight success story, in our distressed mortgage debt business. So yeah, it wasn't until that point that we sort of got the business going to the point where, we were paying ourselves, a good amount of money and we had some chunks coming in and so then we were able to do, much cooler stuff, much cooler vacations, and that sort of thing. So, but we tried again, even as the, the income level was going up, we didn't ramp up our expenses, to keep pace with it. We still just kept it pretty modest. So as a result, well, thankfully my son got the ROTC scholarship. So his college was full ride, but, my daughter's, college was paid for, many years ago as well. So we're in a great position there. Now the house is paid off, that sort of thing. So now because we were very modest early on, we've set ourselves up really nicely now as I'm, entering my mid 50s. In fact, just recently this plan was in place for a while, but every year I'm able to take a little bit of a step back from the company as far as my day-to-day, obligations. So, going into I just had a birthday last week. So I'm like, all right, guys, I'm taking the next step in my plan that I told you about. So I'm going to be delegating this and delegating that. I'm going to be working remotely primarily. I'm going to be, really just working Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Thursdays. So, I'll see you on the other side kind of thing. But, it took a long time to get there. I mean, this is, 18 years ago that I got out there and started my own thing. So it's taken a long time, but I think just, living modestly and cause, as we've all experienced, there's ups and there's downs. And so, you don't ever want to get too high and never want to get too low. So just want to kind of keep things steady.
Is your wife still doing her W-2 gig, or did she ever stop that at some point?
She is. Yeah. She's still doing it, but she doesn't have to.
Right. So she just wants to, huh? She likes it.
Yep. She likes it.
So your kids are about to be gone and you are or will be soon empty nesters.
We are the empty nesters. Yep.
What's the plan? How are you dealing with that?
Well, I've been a golfer like my whole life, so I'm working on my golf game. I've also played music my whole life. So I just, I joined a rock and roll band recently. So I'm actually the front man in a rock and roll band. We play 70s, 80s, 90s, cover rock. And I'm having a blast with that. It's so fun. I'm enjoying it a lot. We had our first gig a few weeks ago. And I think it went pretty well. It was a good crowd, and we rocked the house pretty good.
Golf and gigs.
That's right.
That's awesome, man.
So in regards to your 8-year overnight success, was there a catalyst? Was there a change? Like, what was the change that happened to that at the end of that time? Or was there not one? It was just like, hey, it took 8 years?
No, there was a huge transaction that it was a life-changing transaction. So as I mentioned, very early in our discussion today, the distressed mortgage debt business is very unpredictable. It's very much subject to banking regulations. And so when, a new administration comes in, some of these new administrations, they really crack down. There's a lot of regulation. And so we went through a period of time where there were not a lot of loans being bought and sold, because the banking regulators were really kind of crunching down on the banks and, throwing these weird, muddy regulations at them. They didn't know what to do, so they didn't do anything. The new administration came in and open up the floodgates. So basically we did like 3 or 4 years of transactions in 1 year in 2018. And so, we had been waiting and waiting and waiting for this because we had everything lined up, ready to go. We had the relationships with the bank. We had the relationships, where we needed them to get that transaction done. We had the money raised. And so 2018 was a life-changing year, and we've just sort of been riding that wave ever since. So, from 2010 to 2018, it was a little bumpy, a little up and down, but we've been in a really good spot ever since 2018.
So, and I want to know a little more details about this. So 2018, you had this relationship with the bank that was very specifically in picking up their non-performing debt. Is that accurate?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And then that became just a repeat source of business from 2018 to present, to be able to have I'll call it, as you kind of described it, making it unstable amount of business more stable.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. And so it allowed us to, a couple things. I mean, we used from 2010 to 2018, we raised money from outside investors to do our note deals, which is great, but it also forced us, of course, to share the profits with our investors, which we were happy to do. But once we did that big transaction in 2018, we were able to make enough money and hold on to it internally that we now fund all of our note pool purchases in-house. So we don't use any outside funding for that. So now we're keeping those profits for ourselves, and we're able to recycle those profits now into self-storage. We have a short-term rental portfolio. We do some hard money lending, et cetera.
Great.
So I want to ask can you hear me okay?
I said you picked up on that one because of the short-term rental portfolio. But yeah.
Yeah, I love short-term rentals. I'll follow up with you at a later date if I can. But
sure, anytime.
Awesome. I'm super curious about distressed debt because, and I'm sure people listening are as well. Most people in real estate don't understand the lending side, anyways, that much. I think. So you're picking up debt that's not performing from a bank. So you're buying something for, I guess, pennies on the dollar. It has to be, right? Because the payments aren't being made. And so then what do you do? Do you go foreclose on the properties, or, because the bank doesn't want to foreclose, so they just sell the debt? Now you can, or what is the steps to profits in doing that, in buying that?
Yeah, good question, Trevor. So I'll just back up a little bit just to give folks context, right? So a bank makes a loan, right? Most of the times they securitize them and sell them off into the world of Wall Street, but sometimes they do what are called whole loans, which are on the balance sheet of the bank. And if that loan goes into default for whatever reason, and we've all, experienced this, having, been in real estate for a while, but there's going to be a life event. There's going to be a divorce. There's going to be a death. There's going to be an illness. There's going to be a job loss. There's going to be, some life event, right, is going to cause somebody to stop paying on their mortgage, unfortunately. So the banks are not set up to do workouts. Their workout box is extremely tiny because they've got a lot of regulations. They're not entrepreneurial. They don't really think out of that little box, right? It's a big institution, these banks, right? So after they go through their lame process, they charge off the loan, which basically means they're going to stop accruing interest on that loan, and it goes into what they call their non-accrual bucket. And the non-accrual bucket is what the regulators are looking at. So when a bank gets too many non-accruing loans, the regulator comes in and says, hey man, you got to clean up your balance sheet. You got to get rid of these loans. So that's when the bank will go out to the marketplace and they will package up this pool of loans and they'll sell it off into the world. There's people, companies who acquire those loans. But it takes, we happen to have just a couple of key relationships that allowed us to get a seat at the table. Of course, we didn't start with that. We started acquiring loans from an intermediary, which has its pros and cons. But the big pro of buying directly from the bank is you get the absolute best pricing. And so, but you got to take the baby and the bathwater, right? You got to take, you can't cherry pick. When you're buying a pool of loans from a big bank, you can't cherry pick, just the best ones. You got to take the whole thing. And so when we buy those non-performing loans, we place them with a servicer because, again, it is still a highly regulated business. So we have to place those loans with a licensed servicer. And so if you guys have ever taken out a mortgage and you took it through a mortgage broker or something, and then a few months later you get a letter in the mail that says, hey, the servicing of your loan has shifted over to Wells Fargo or whatever. So that's kind of what happens with our borrowers, is a welcome letter just basically saying, hey, your loan is now owned by U.S. Mortgage Resolution and it's serviced at Land Home Financial out of Pasadena, California. So then we have an internal process of reaching out to those borrowers and saying, we ask them 3 questions. What happened? Where are you now? And what do you want to do? So what happened is, well, I got divorced, or, I had a job loss or something. Well, where are you now? Well, I got a new job. I've got some money coming in. Well, what do you want to do? I want to keep the house. Okay, great. Let's work on re-underwriting this loan with your new financial reality and figure out the proper payment plan. So we're able to modify these loans, and because we are acquiring them at a deep discount, we have a lot of flexibility in terms of how we structure that modification. And it's still a huge win-win, right? It's actually a win-win-win. It's a win for the bank because they're getting a non-accrual loan off their books. It's a win for the borrower because they're usually ending up paying less and maybe even getting some principal forgiven. And that's a win for us because we're making a great return on our investment.
Wow.
So it's just a win all the way around.
That is super cool. And so with these borrowers, I don't know if you know this answer, but do they have a charge-off on their credit report, or does it kind of...
They do, yeah. So they'll have a charge-off on their credit report, which makes it difficult for them to get another loan. But what ends up happening is by the time we end up with the loan, it's usually a couple of years have gone by since they went into default. And so that length of time actually benefits us because it gives the borrower time to overcome whatever the problem was, the life event was that caused them to default in the first place. And let's face it, people don't want to default on their loan.
No,
right?
yeah.
They're raising their family there. They've got kids in school. They go to church around the corner. They're friends with their neighbors, right? So we call that emotional equity. So even if the numbers don't work financially on the property, they still want to do some kind of workout because they have this emotional equity in that property. It's where they're raising their kids. Back to the theme of the show, right? It's where they're raising their kids. They play in the backyard. They play in the neighborhood. They're on the cul-de-sac. They love that. So it's really a great business. We've helped at this point thousands and thousands of homeowners keep their homes. So to your earlier question, Max, we hardly ever foreclose, and we've transacted on over 11,000 loans through U.S. Mortgage Resolution. We've hardly ever foreclosed because foreclosing is a lose-lose, right? We're looking for the win-win. Right? We lose because, just going through the foreclosure process as a lender is expensive, time consuming, stressful. It's just not great. And of course it's horrible for the borrower too.
You've done 11,000 of these?
Yeah.
Over how many?
I thought we had the self-storage guy, man. This is, this is awesome.
Wait, 11,000 over how many years? How big is your team?
Over 14 years. So we started in 2010. There's 4 of us, me and my partner, Joe, and then Rob is our kind of portfolio manager, and then Gretchen is our administrator. That's
$785 a year. So that means you're working through 65 of these a month?
Good question, Max. We don't work out all of them. Here's the other fun secret to our distressed debt business is since as we have ascended to acquiring directly from the bank and we're getting that great pricing, we can actually take that pool, that big pool, and we can chop it up into smaller pools. And we have what we call a downline of note buyers that we've developed over the years around the country. So we can chop up that big pool into smaller pools and we can sell those off and basically make a risk-free profit on those loans.
So now you're the intermediary.
And selling. That's right. We've become the intermediary.
That's great.
Yeah.
And and this is all single family. Do you pick up any multi, any commercial, or any other kind of properties that are income properties versus the residential?
We've primarily been residential. We do have a commercial portfolio that we bought years ago. Commercial is a different game. That, like we were just talking about, the emotional equity, that's out the window. There's no emotional equity in a commercial transaction. And the other thing is, business people usually have, attorneys, and, they fight this kind of stuff, and they're just generally savvier than your average, residential homeowner borrower. And so that was the lesson we learned in that. Now, look, we made money on that pool, and we're actually still making money on it, but it's a different game, and it's a much longer game and a much more challenging game because there's a lot more legal involved.
So all this great like financial knowledge and experience, were you at any time making your kids work in your business or making them be exposed to all this stuff you're doing or any of it?
Oh, a little bit. Neither one really gravitated toward it too much. But back when I was doing some fix and flips and some rentals and stuff, like I would bring my son with me from time to time when he was maybe, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, somewhere in there. He thought it was cool because, you're going into like a construction site kind of thing, and you're looking to, and learning, seeing with your own eyes, like how a house is built or, rehabbed, torn down and rebuilt kind of thing. So I think he liked it. But, and that all being said, and like, as we discussed, he's going to like the exact opposite career of what I do. But that being said, he is already investing. So he is already, taking a little piece of his monthly stipend from his ROTC days, and he's putting that into just a regular kind of managed mutual fund account. So just as a place to get started. He started dabbling in like $50 a month into his crypto account and stuff like that. So he's just sort of feeling things out. But, he does ask me about investing, and now he's already thinking about, should he buy a house when he goes to nuclear power school, or should he just keep renting? So we're sort of having those discussions, which is kind of cool. None of that's happening with my daughter.
Are you going to tell him to use his VA loan to buy a fourplex when he goes to that school?
That's a great idea, and I should do that. He was telling me about that, and I was like, Andrew, do you think I could get in front of your squad? Because if I could have all of his ROTC, squad, invest with me, like even if it's like a private money, if it's a private money deal where first position on a rehab deal where we're getting paid 12%, that loan is only at like 2 or 3%. I'm like, yeah, you could make a nice spread. Anyway, I pushed it a little too far on that one. I was like, all right, never mind. But I'm always thinking.
Oh, that's a great tool. He's going to have at his disposal for the rest of his life. And,
for sure.
I used to sell VA loans, so I brokered them for a while and used it myself personally. So I know all the tricks in that thing, and that's one of the best. I like the best house hack tool. You literally get into a multifamily building, with no money out of pocket at all. Make the seller pay all their closing costs, buy down your rate, no mortgage insurance, have the other 3 tenants pay for it.
Yeah.
It's a great jumpstart to like your real estate investing career, or life.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's a great idea. I'll run that one by him for sure.
All right, cool. I need to know how that goes. Yes.
So Tom, let's jump back to how you were raised. And so you got into corporate job first, moved into being an entrepreneur. And is your father still alive?
He's not.
He's not. I'm sorry. So with being raised by him, what was the guidance like from him? He wasn't as intimately involved as you are with your kids, but how was that?
Yeah, I mean, my dad was kind of the life of the party guy. He was a sales guy, and just always had a funny joke to tell. Sadly, he's been gone 20 years this past February, so yeah, it's been a while. But thankfully, my mom is still kicking; she's doing great. But our parents. Well, I think I'm older than you guys, but my parents' generation, most of them were in jobs where they were getting pensions, right? And then when pensions went away, they just started stuffing their 401ks, and they didn't really know what they thought a 401k was an investment, right? It's like people say, oh, I'm investing in an IRA. It's like, no, that's just the account. But anyway, so they didn't really have any financial education. It wasn't really at the front of their minds. Thankfully my mom started buying a little bit of gold every year, for many, many, many years. But my dad, I remember him telling me when I was getting out of business school, buy blue chip stocks. That's what he told me. I'm like, okay, Dad, I'm on it, because of course at that time, that's all I knew, right? All I knew was, hey, I got to figure out this mutual fund thing and this 401k thing. And that's when I started doing those online calculators. When you're putting in your 15% of your salary, it's like, okay, what rate is it going to grow at? And you do the calculator on the website. I'm like,
you'll be a millionaire when you die.
Yeah, it's like, that's all it's going to grow to? There's got to be a better way. And that's when that started my wheels turning about, getting out into real estate. But I had to figure it out myself. And, thankfully I've been able to learn and apply and fail and learn some more and succeed and fail again. So it's been that whole cycle of ups and downs. But along the way, I've been able to teach my mom, right? So a quick story. After the internet bubble burst, my parents' retirement account basically got cut in half, right? And so they thought that they were going to retire on 6% from CDs, right? So now they've got half the money that they had, previously, and CDs aren't paying 6%. They're paying 1%. So how do you retire on that? So now, and then my dad passes away. Now here's my mom. She's got half the money, and instead of making 6%, she's making 1%. So talk about a drastic just explosion of a retirement plan that they had worked on their whole lives, right? And like my mom went back to work when I was 10 years old. And my dad had been working his whole career. So now what's Betty going to do? How is Betty going to retire? She's 65. What is she going to do? So 2006, I get fired. I start learning. I'm like, hey, Mom, you might want to look at doing some lending. You might want to look at doing, some private placements. You might want to look at, I tell you what, if you put up some money and I rehab and fix up this house, here's what I'll pay you. And so it just sort of started like that. And now, thankfully, Betty's kicking butt. She's a badass real estate investor now. Like she won't do a deal unless she's making 10%.
Yes. Go Mom.
And so and she's gotten the income going to the point where she doesn't dip into her principal. And her net worth is growing every year because she's obviously living pretty modestly. She's well into her 80s at this point, very healthy, thankfully. But she thanks me all the time. She's like, thank you so much for, exposing me to these different alternative investment ideas. And so that's real life right there. And that's what I'm hoping to do for all of our investors out there and anybody else who will listen to my long-winded answers.
Yeah.
Is, really help them. Especially where I'm at in my career. I have so much, like you mentioned earlier, Trevor, I got so much knowledge in this, big head of mine. I want to get it out. I want to share it with people so I can just impact and change as many lives as I can.
That's awesome, man. Yeah.
So, Tom, we're about at the end of this. We're about to land this plane here. I've appreciated having you on. Trevor, do you have anything else you want to go over here at the end of this?
We could pull strings for hours, but I'm really grateful for what we've got out of this. Yeah.
Yeah, Tom, thanks for being on. We get so much from, all of the guests we have in some way. And, because Trevor and I, we're both the young dad thing, we don't know how things are going to happen when we're like, this is how we're going to raise our kids when they're teenagers, when they're going to college. And then we realize it's just like, nice planning kind of a thing. So, we like hearing it from guys who have been, further along in the process. I
learned that cheerleading is okay today.
That's
hopefully. Yeah. I know. That's the one I'm still debating on with my wife.
Yeah. If it's okay, I've got a quick short story. If it's okay before we break off.
Yeah.
Because it has to do with my daughter. She was probably, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 or 8. She's in her booster seat in the back of the car. We're driving somewhere. I forget. It was just the two of us. She says, hey, Dad, how do you get rich? So how do you explain that to, call it 7-year-old kid? Do you know what I told her? I said, sweetheart, spend less than you earn, and you'll eventually get rich. So we touched on that topic a few times during our discussion today. And if your kids are little, that's something that they can digest pretty easily. And I think, hopefully, we'll see. She's only 19, but hopefully she'll carry that with her, because I thought that on the fly, I thought that was a pretty great answer.
That's pretty good. I do have a follow-up to that, though, Tom.
Yeah.
At what point did you then introduce compounding interest?
I was still waiting on that one, Trev.
No, it's still not. Okay, gotcha. All right.
Still waiting on that one. But yeah, I think that's a good story for all the dads out there.
Great.
Yeah, that's a good, simple way to put it.
The educational wisdom starts at 7. It starts with the base level engagement.
Yeah.
That is, I mean, I got to tell you, Tom, because right now I'm trying to teach my oldest daughter the importance of making money and being able to sell. So we have some hens, and I got her selling eggs to our neighbors. Yeah.
Perfect.
And awesome. It's a work in progress. I'm actually working on my neighbors because, the last time I tried to take her out, or I did take her out to sell eggs, I was like, all right, what are the benefits of these eggs? What can you do with them? Can you, how can you cook them? Right? So that you can, sell them. And she's like, and we rehearsed a little bit. Right. And then she walks up to my neighbor, knocks on the door, and he opens it. And he's like, Milton, you want to buy some eggs? And he, his heart melted and he bought some. I'm like,
right.
And I told Milton,
no sales pitch whatsoever.
I was like, Milton, you need to push back a little harder next time, right? I expect more out of you, all right? You sold cars for a living. Come on, make her work for it. But anyways, and now she just spends it all like that. And I'm trying to let her just do that for a while, until she at least learn the value of money and that it sucks when it runs out, And so what I was going to segue into next from that, I hadn't quite clarified. So that's actually really great advice for, the road I'm going down right now. So thank you for that.
Cool. Like Jim Rohn says, don't spend the whole dollar.
There you go. Yeah.